Madam Chair, to the Adoption and Special Guardianship Support Fund. This fund was set up under the Conservative Government in 2015 as a result of the 2014 Children and Families Act. It was designed to help the families access specialist therapy services that they may need. Since the Adoption and Children Act 2002, adoptive families have had a right to the assessment of their adoption support needs from their local authority. However, the 2014 Act brought in a number of further measures to support adoptive families, including this fund. In 2023, the fund was expanded to include kinship care, enabling some children with special guardianship or child arrangement orders to qualify for support too. A solid legacy to work from. However, since July 2024, there was a cloud of uncertainty about the future of the fund. The Adoption and Special Guardianship Support Fund, a lifeline to thousands of vulnerable children, was left hanging in the balance. Families were left wondering whether the therapeutic support their children desperately need would vanish overnight. In April, the Department for Education announced significant cuts to the Adoption and Special Guardianship Support Fund. The annual therapy funding per child has been slashed from £5,000 to £3,000. The separate £2,500 allowance for specialist assessments, that's gone. Match funding to support the most complex cases, gone. And the ability to carry support across financial years, also gone. A shocking 40% reduction in funding for support that we all know is highly specialised and comes at a cost as a result. My constituent CA said these children are slipping through the net and it is the parents who are dealing with the fallout. Excessive child-on-parent violence, total exhaustion from managing needs at home and constant battling with professionals. I myself have had to give up my career, incidentally she was a teacher, in order to maintain the daily battle of getting her to school, then constant meetings to get her any sort of education that meets her needs. It's exhausting. Joanne said, myself and my husband adopted our daughter 12 years ago and our son 6 years ago. They both have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder alongside autism spectrum disorder. My son is 6 years old and because of the trauma he endured in utero, he also has complex needs and has suicidal ideation with intent and wishes he had never been born. We were lucky enough to secure vital match funding last year to enable the sensory OT to have weekly sessions to support him in controlling his motions and to create a specific sensory diet which school will be able to use to support him in accessing school and supporting his needs. To hear that the fund is being reduced to £3,000 is truly terrifying. As a family, we have been in crisis and at risk of family placement breakdown, as having 2 complex children is exhausting physically, mentally and emotionally, and my husband and myself had nothing left in the tank to carry on. I have been able to work for 6 years due to my daughter being unable to access education as her needs were not understood or being met. The Labour government promised to be different, to be bold, to put children first, but when it came to one of the most vulnerable groups in our society, children who've experienced trauma, neglect and loss, they hesitated, they wavered and they failed to provide the leadership we were told to expect. The government say the changes have been made to maximise the number of children supported, but how can they claim to support more children by offering them less? How can they ask families to step up and adopt or become guardians only to pull the rug out from under them when they need the most support? As another constituent wrote, I am in the final months of a doctorate to become a clinical psychologist, and much of my work is with families who rely on this fund. Children and young people who are adopted have almost all experienced developmental trauma and are left with many relational and neurodevelopmental complexities that require long-term specialist support and intervention in order to heal. Parenting these children is usually not straightforward and can be incredibly challenging and draining, requiring specialist support. I have little doubt that with the reduction of the fund, we will see a significant increase in adoption breakdowns. This is not only incredibly traumatic for all involved, but is also incredibly expensive, far greater than the costs that will be saved through the reduction in the support fund. The cost of keeping a child in care has been estimated at around £280,000, significantly more than the £2,000 that has been cut. And we know that this is not the only cost that will increase. As well as the risk of returning to care, adopted young people face tougher educational and employment outcomes, and their mental health and well-being is significantly impacted, especially as they transition to adulthood. We have just had the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill progress through the Commons. Why undermine the aims within that by severely limiting the support in the ASGSF? What has become clear throughout the last few months is that this shouldn't be a binary decision. It should not be about spreading funding thinly to go further. It should be about extending the funding at its previous levels, to see a return to the £5,000 fair access limit, to reinstate the £2,500 allowance for specialist assessments, to allow for match funding, to make the funding permanent and not subject to annual spending rounds, and to seek to provide it for more families. And to recognise that if this money is not provided in this ring-fenced way by government, it will fall onto local authorities to find the money, and we know how that tends to end up. With one final quote, if I may, Madam Chair. To conclude, the voice of one final constituent, another professional working in this field, raises some serious questions which perhaps I hope the Minister can address. She says there has been no consultation process at all. How can this be fair or legal as adoptive and kinship families have access to therapies in their adoption and special guardianship order paperwork and in their EHCP agreements? Who will adopt disabled children where lots of intervention and support is necessary? How many children will return to care? What will families do without multidisciplinary assessments, where it is beyond negligence to take this away, as it is often the only thing that triggers considered recommendations for adopted children in EHCPs, for case reviews, for providing carefully managed intervention plans? Our previously looked after children are being discriminated against due to their complex needs, where families face yet another closed doors. So I call on the Minister to reverse her decision and to acknowledge that the risk of not doing so opens up an uncertain future for these special children, young people and their families.